The hottest summers of the 1940s didn't care about uniforms, borders or shortages. Steel helmets baked, barracks turned into ovens, cities rationed power. And air conditioning, that was a luxury almost nobody had. Yet soldiers and civilians still found a way to sleep, work, and survive brutal heat without burning a single watt. This wasn't comfort. This was quiet genius. And you know, it's a trick worth remembering now more than ever. How necessity turned windows into cooling machines. World War II forced people to solve problems with what was already on hand. No spare parts, no extra fuel, just discipline and physics. Across military camps, hospitals and crowded apartments, a simple setup began to appear. An open window, a light-coloured linen or cotton sheet, a bucket of water. The cloth was soaked until damp, never dripping. It was hung directly inside the open window, covering the frame like a curtain. When the breeze passed through, the air felt different, cooler, softer, almost like relief. This wasn't folklore. It was field-tested survival. In army medical wards, this method helped reduce heat stress. In European cities under blackout rules, it allowed airflow without light leakage. In homes with children and elderly, it turned unbearable rooms into livable spaces. No noise, no power, no moving parts, just air and water working together. The science that made it work. This trick relies on evaporative cooling, one of the oldest natural cooling processes on Earth. When water evaporates, it needs energy. It pulls that energy from the surrounding air in the form of heat. As the water in the cloth changes from liquid to vapour, it steals warmth from the passing air. That air enters the room cooler than it arrived. Dry air makes this effect stronger. The drier the air, the faster evaporation happens. That's why, you know, the trick worked best in inland summers, and less so in humid coastal heat. Linen and cotton mattered. These natural fibres hold water well while allowing airflow. Synthetic fabrics didn't perform nearly as well. Light colours reflected heat instead of absorbing it. Every detail had a purpose, even if people didn't always know the science behind it. They didn't need to. It worked. So, we're rebuilding the setup today. Honestly, this is one of the easiest low-tech cooling systems you can recreate at home. All you need is a window that opens. Ideally, you want one that's facing the prevailing breeze, and, you know, if you have 2 windows across the room, that's even better. That setup creates cross-ventilation. Next, you need a cloth. Linen is best, but cotton works just fine. A towel can work as a last resort, though it's less efficient. The cloth should be clean and light-coloured. Now, soak the cloth in cool water, then wring it out so it's wet but not dripping. Hang it inside the window frame. Make sure to secure it so air has to pass through the fabric to enter the room. Place a shallow pan or tray below to catch any drips. and that's it. For a little extra effect, you can place a second damp cloth in a doorway or another window to help guide the airflow. And if you're using a modern fan, make sure to point it toward the window from inside the room, not directly at your body. This way, it pulls air through the wet cloth, instead of just moving hot air around. During World War II, people would refresh the cloth every few hours. At night, though, it could stay damp for much longer. So, how did it stack up against fans and early cooling methods? Well, fans don't actually cool the air. They cool people by moving hot air across your skin, which helps increase sweat evaporation. But in extreme heat, especially when temperatures rise above body temperature, fans can become useless or even dangerous. The wet window method actually lowers air temperature. Not dramatically, though. Usually it's somewhere between 5 and 15 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the humidity. But in survival conditions, that difference really matters. Early air conditioning units existed in the 1940s, but they were massive, expensive and energy-hungry. Factories used them. Homes did not. The window cloth trick required no grid, no fuel, no maintenance. In a blackout, it still worked. In a fuel shortage, it still worked. In a world where resilience mattered more than comfort, this method delivered. Why preppers should care now? Modern life assumes electricity will always be there. History says otherwise. Heatwaves are becoming more frequent. Power grids fail. Wildfires and storms knock out systems fast. This World War II method fits perfectly into a prepper mindset. It's silent, invisible, reliable. It doesn't advertise your presence. It doesn't strain resources. In a long-term emergency, air conditioning becomes a liability. There's noise, a big power draw, and, well, a real dependence on things you might not have. This trick doesn't replace AC, but honestly it bridges the gap between suffering and stability. It also stacks with other low-tech methods, you know, like shaded windows, closed curtains during the day, ventilation at night, thick walls and thermal mass. Altogether, these strategies kept entire cities functioning during wartime summers. The deeper lesson behind the trick, really, is this. It wasn't about being clever. It was about understanding the environment and working with it instead of fighting it. The people who survived the hardest conditions weren't the ones with the most gear. They were the ones who knew how to adapt. The deeper lesson behind the trick, well, it's not really about being clever. It's about understanding the environment and, you know, working with it instead of fighting against it. The people who survived the hardest conditions weren't the ones with the most gear. They were the ones who knew how to adapt. Evaporative cooling didn't come from a lab. It came from observation, like just watching sweat dry on skin, and from ancient techniques, slowly refined under pressure. World War II didn't invent this trick. It proved it under fire. And today, with all our technology, it's easy to forget that the simplest solutions often last the longest. Why this secret deserves to be remembered. History hides its best lessons in plain sight. A wet cloth in a window doesn't look impressive. It won't sell gadgets. But it kept people alive, focused and functional when the world was on edge. Why this secret deserves to be remembered. History hides its best lessons in plain sight. A wet cloth in a window doesn't look impressive. It won't sell gadgets. But it kept people alive, focused and functional when the world was on edge. For preppers, this is gold. For historians, it's a reminder of human ingenuity. For everyone else, it's proof that comfort doesn't always require complexity. If this kind of forgotten knowledge matters to you, if you want more real-world survival history pulled straight from the past and tested for today, make sure you subscribe to Prepper's Survival Blueprint. Share this with someone who thinks survival is all about high-tech gear. Sometimes the strongest tools are the quiet ones history already gave us. If this kind of forgotten knowledge matters to you, if you want more real-world survival history pulled straight from the past and tested for today, make sure you subscribe to Prepper's Survival Blueprint. Share this with someone who thinks survival is all about high-tech gear. Sometimes the strongest tools are the quiet ones history already gave us.